Hello and welcome back to the podcast. This is Terrence McKenna. Mike asked me to come back from the great beyond to be transfigured in through this digital media. A media of memes, you might say. And who better to listen to than the meme poet master himself, James McCrae, who runs a page on Instagram called Words Are Vibrations, which I also predicted. Well, I wasn't going to rap too much about anything as we approach the weekend and you all want to enjoy. But while I have you here and I'm pretty loaded, I might just riff for about 5 hours on the nature of human consciousness in this reality. You see, the idea that we have gone sick by following a path of untrammeled rationalism, male dominance, attention to the visible surface of things, practicality, bottom lineism. We have gone very sick, and the body politic, like any body, when it feels sick, it begins to produce antibodies and strategies for overcoming the conditions of disease. The 20th century is an enormous effort at self-healing. Phenomena as diverse as surrealism, body piercing, psychedelic drug use, sexual permissiveness, jazz, experimental dance, rave culture, tattooing. The list is endless. And what do all these things have in common? They represent the very rejection of linear values. This society is trying to cure itself by an archaic revival, by a reversion to archaic values. So when I see people manifesting sexual ambiguity or scarifying themselves or showing lots of flesh or dancing to syncopated music or getting loaded or violating ordinary canons of sexual behavior, I applaud all of this. Because it's the impulse to return to what is felt by the body, what is authentic, what is archaic. And when you tease apart these archaic impulses, at the very center is a desire to return to a world of magical empowerment of feeling. And at the center of that impulse is the shaman, stoned and exalted, intoxicated in plant, speaking with the spirit helpers, dancing in the moonlight, vivifying and invoking a world of conscious living mystery. That is what the world is, you see. The world is not an unsolved problem for scientists or sociologists. The world is a living mystery. Our birth, our death, our being in the moment, these are mysteries. They are doorways opening onto unimaginable vistas of self-exploration, empowerment, and hope for the human enterprise. Well, that's all for me now. I have to get back. Jimi Hendrix is throwing a party with Hugh Hefner, and they need someone to roll copious amounts of doobies for them. I volunteered. Until next time, thank you for having me here. And remember, take it easy, dude, but take it.
Wow, thanks, Terrence. Appreciate you being here and giving us that little mind jam. Very, very grateful for your presence. Well, hey, everybody, I'm Mike Brancatelli. This is Micadelic. You're you. That was Terrence McKenna. And yeah, we're going to get into this great episode with James McCrae. Before we do, big shout out to our sponsors, the people that make this show possible, that keep this thing moving along. And just a brief one, because all the links are in the show description, show notes, so you can go and follow them. Today's podcast is brought to you by Being True to You, a coaching company that helps people prepare and integrate psychedelic experiences and navigate addiction and recovery with virtual one-on-one and group coaching. They also run a one-of-a-kind coaching, training, and certification program for people who want to build a career helping others transform their lives in a positive way. Oh, thanks, Terrence, for the help on that one. If you're interested in learning more about psychedelics or have a family member suffering from addiction and you want to help veterans struggling with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, Being True to You is the industry standard for training coaches and getting the real results that people need to get passion and purpose back in their lives. So please go check them out. I really like what these guys are doing. Being True to You's coaching training program starts on September 8th, and they have limited seats. So go to beingtruetoyou.com, sign up today. The course is an in-depth journey into the nature of addiction, the healing power of psychedelics, and the process of coaching people through transformational work. Their training is really powerful, and it'll really change how you look at and experience the world. The course has over 100 hours of instruction, 800 pages of learning material. Classes are held on Zoom, and they include lectures, group discussions, and they're taught by Being True to You's founder, Deanne Adamson, who has a master's degree in counseling, and co-hosted by Dr. Dan Engel, a neuroscientist and renowned psychedelic expert. So this course is designed for people who want to build a career in the psychedelic renaissance as an integration coach, as a professional therapist and for professional therapists. This is for professional therapists, counselors, facilitators, social workers who want to deepen their understanding of addiction, self-actualization, anybody that wants to deepen their understanding of addiction, self-actualization, and psychedelic work and support others. Go to Being True to You coaching and their upcoming coach training program. Head on over there. The link is in the show notes, in the show description. Thank you to Sheath Underwear, who is so amazing in their philanthropic endeavors, giving back to the community, helping invest in making the world a better place, and supporting podcasts like this. Sheath Underwear is by far the most comfortable underwear that I've ever worn. I wear them all the time. Quite frankly, I need a couple more pairs, actually. So they got this new bamboo pair out, and I haven't tried it yet, but their shirts are made of bamboo, and it's really, 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 really comfortable. And really comfortable. I love them. I love their bamboo shirts. So now they have a new pair of underwear with that bamboo material, and I really want to try it. So Sheath, send me over a pair in black. Thank you. And they're just the best. They have dual pouches for your man parts. So what that means is they separate your testicles and your penis into different compartments. And that's really, really useful when you're doing activity like at the gym or running, or it's a hot day and you're hiking. Sometimes I wear the pouch, and then sometimes I don't wear the pouch, and they're just as good, just as comfortable. The material is amazing, and they have a money-back guarantee on your first pair. So go to sheathunderwear.com, put in the promo code Micadelic, and you get 20% off. It's just the best. I'm really super excited to just continue to work with them. They're amazing, and they're just the most comfortable pair of underwear. So try them out. Money-back guarantee. Promo code Micadelic. You're not going to need the money back guarantee because you're going to love it. I know you're going to love it. They're my favorite pair of underwear. I don't wear anything else now, and I couldn't imagine wearing anything else. So Micadelic is the promo code. You get 20% off. Next, we have Fungi Academy. Fungi Academy is 25% off their courses with the promo code Micadelic, and the link is in the description. Go check them out. They make amazing videos for growing mushrooms. You need to learn about the mycelial web in order to understand the different intelligence that is the mushroom kingdom. It's alien.
It has information that's waiting for you to download it if you just take the right amount.
So go to Fungi Academy and learn how to grow mushrooms, learn about sacred mycology, cultivation, and psychedelic journey work. They have amazing courses with really fun, interactive, and engaging videos and coursework. It's a really colorful, rich, engaging experience. So if you like, this is where to start. For me, for Jasper, for all the other people involved in Fungi Academy, like I'm sure that we talked about this, going through all the things you need to go through to learn on your own can be really challenging and difficult, and where to look, and people have contradicting opinions on different forums and this and that. Fungi Academy makes it really simple and puts it all in one place. I highly recommend them. Go check them out, and you get a nice fat 25% discount off their courses for sacred mycology, mushroom cultivation, and psychedelic journey work. Please check it out. Links in the description. Big shout out to Ohana Kava Bar, the best kava in the world, makes you feel relaxed and happy. Put in the promo code TIMEWHEEL for 10% off. Mushroom Revival makes great products. Put in the promo code Mycadelic and you get 15% off. And Student Loan Tutor is doing their best to help get people out of debt, student loan debt. So give them a call. They give you a free consultation. I was going to say consolation. They give you a free consolation. Well, we can't help you, but how about a Hershey's chocolate bar? All right, so that's it. Thank you to everybody that leaves 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. It helps boost us up in the algorithm and makes this show more visible to people that want to hear things like this. So thank you to everybody that does that. I love and appreciate all of you. Consider joining the Patreon. It's patreon.com/MikeBrank. I do early release episodes, bonus Dosadelic episodes. We have the Mycadelic Inner Sanctum Discord chat. So it's just a place where we're developing community of like-minded, like-hearted individuals to come together that like the things that we talk about on this show to form more of a community together. So please check that out. Plus, there's, bonus stuff like shirts and stickers and things like that. And what else do I have to say? I don't know. I love all you guys. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Had a great conversation with James. Oh, one more thing before we get into the show. This is important. So the show will start off with good quality on my end of the microphone. And what happened was there was a glitch in Zencastr that caused it to disconnect from my audio interface that I was using. Even though I went back and I selected the audio interface, it didn't pick up on it in the recording. So what they told me I had to do was refresh it, but I didn't know that at the time. So I had just assumed that because I had selected the correct thing in the settings that we were fine because we got disconnected from the call about 13 minutes in and then we picked it back up. So my side of the audio is going to sound like I'm on a cell phone or something. And James's side of the audio is great. But this was just a minor glitch that happened with Zencastr. I talked to them. They did their best to help me out and resolve it. And we fixed it up as best as we could. But yeah, it's not the level of quality that I want to put out. But this is just one of those freak things that happened. And the conversation was so good. And James's, it's salvageable. It's fine. It's listenable. It's totally fine. It's just not the level of quality on my end that I'm used to. So the conversation's so good, I didn't want to redo it. This is the conversation, and it's kind of apropos as James and I were talking a little bit about trying too hard to force everything to be perfect, and sometimes things are messy, and art and creativity doesn't always go the way you plan. You just have to kind of show up, and here I am showing up and doing the podcast and putting it out there because I think it's a great episode. And apologies for my side of the audio sounding a little less high quality than normal, but it's all audible, it's understandable, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And please get in touch with me. I love hearing feedback from you. Go follow James, Words or Vibrations. Check out his website and his new book, How to Laugh in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis. It's the best title in the world, and it's coming out soon. So please go check that out. James is just an absolutely fascinating, wonderful, beautiful human being, and really, really enjoyed this conversation very much. So without further ado, let's get into it with the wonderful, talented meme poet, Master James McCrae.
podcast. I was on Zoom for a while, then I switched back to Zencaster, and it is a lot better.
Cool. Yeah, I always wonder what's better or not. To use. I was using Squadcast for a little while. I had some issues with them, but yeah, this seems to be good. So yeah, for your podcast, you recently rebranded it as Homesick Alien Club, right?
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I've had a kind of start-stop relationship with my podcast for a couple years. I started it when I was living in New York City in like summer of 2019, and I had never had my own podcast before. But I figured if I ever wanted to have a podcast, I might as well just start right away before I was ready to do it well, just so I could get the bad episodes out of the way. Because I think for everything, the beginning is awkward. It takes some time to kind of find your rhythm, to find your own unique voice. So I did a bunch of podcasts in New York, and then I moved to LA right before the beginning of the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, do you remember, like, there was a time when, because suddenly everything was online and people were going on IG Live and people were dropping digital streaming and digital content. And I was so overwhelmed by the amount of just digital content everywhere that I decided just to put my podcast on hiatus for a little bit. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, where I live now, and I started it back up under a different name. And then just like a couple months ago, the idea of Homesick Alien Club came to me because I posted a meme that said, "The homesick alien in me recognizes the homesick alien in you."
Yes, I love that one.
And it was kind of just like a joke. I didn't think much of it, but I got such positive feedback from that sentiment because it really struck a chord. And I realized that to a certain degree, all of us who are, at least somewhat aware or, self-conscious, self-aware, we all kind of feel like, this isn't quite our home. Like, we all come from somewhere else, like whether that, you can put whatever metaphor you want on it. But, the alien metaphor is that we all kind of come from a different planet, a different galaxy, a different dimension, and we don't quite feel at home here on Earth. So the joke is that we're here visiting Earth and we're here temporarily, and eventually we're all going to go back to where we came from. But for now, we're all homesick aliens. And I liked the idea of putting a club on it because this idea of community, we're all, if you listen to the podcast, you're in the club. If you come onto the podcast, you're in the club. And I've realized that it actually has helped people feel a little bit less alone because people are like, oh, I've felt this way for a long time. So it's just kind of a fun way. And, I like to have humor in everything I do without being too serious about, we're longing for a different world or heaven or a better life. It's how can you say that same thing, but make it funny and put a bit of a joke on it. So that was kind of the idea behind Homesick Alien Club.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I love it. I definitely relate to that 100%. Yeah, so we got to meet recently in Austin. Thank you for coming to that event, by the way. That it was so fun. It was such a good time to be there. We got to chat a little bit, and we're both former New Yorkers who have left the Big Apple. I don't even know if anyone calls it that anymore. I remember that, like, growing up, the Big Apple. And you're originally from Minnesota, right? And you moved to New York.
That's right. Yeah, I'm originally from a very small town in Minnesota, basically just rural Minnesota, the land of soybeans and cornfields and lakes. And kind of moved around Minnesota, found my way to Minneapolis, and lived in Minneapolis for a handful of years. Had a lot of fun there. It's a great kind of underrated city in terms of music and culture and art. So shout out Minneapolis. But then, yeah, in 2012, I kind of always wanted to move to New York City as a writer and as a poet. Like, it seemed like all my favorite writers and artists had kind of spent some time in New York City. So I always felt somewhat called there. And when the stars were aligned and the timing was right, I decided to move there. And yeah, I spent about 8 years in New York City, the first 4 in Brooklyn and the next 4 in Manhattan. And it's an amazing place to live. I'm so happy that I got to spend some time there. And I'm also grateful that I no longer live there, just with the state of the world today. And,
Right.
you know, it's a great place to live, and it's also a stressful place to live. So I felt like I've just been so much more at peace with myself since leaving the city.
Yeah, I feel like I got what I needed to get out of it when I was there. And 2012 was also kind of a big transformative year for me as well, as I'm sure a lot of people have shared this experience. People that I've had on the podcast, a mutual friend of ours, Jennifer Sodini. I mean, I remember her telling me how kind of pivotal 2012 was for her as well. And of course, we're all familiar with like the 2012 Mayan prophecy thing and all that, and who knows what's what with that. But there definitely shifts happened, and yeah, I think I got what I needed to get from living in New York City, and now I'm happier being in a little bit of a smaller city and calmer and kind of more a little bit more free, more open, a little more nature. Definitely a lot more nature here in Colorado. And one of the places that I was thinking of was Austin. And I'm still curious about Austin. It seems like there's a really good energy there. There's a really good creative energy going on in Austin. What has it been like for you since moving there?
It's really interesting. My fiance and I decided to move here. We had never been here before. Neither one of us had ever even visited, and we didn't even know anyone here. And it was just kind of like a spontaneous decision based on intuition, and it just felt right. So we're just like, let's do it. And everything fell into place really quickly, which is usually an indication that you're aligned with what you're supposed to be doing when there's not a lot of force and friction. And that's how it was. And one thing that I can't even explain is that, you've seen my Instagram, and, for those who followed me on Instagram at Words Are Vibrations, I post a lot of memes and poetry and stuff like that. And I post pretty much every day, sometimes twice a day. That all started as soon as I moved to Austin. And I can't really explain it. Like, I was in LA and I was posting like a normal person, like once a week. And I think I had like 20,000 followers when I left LA, and I got here, and I kind of distinctly remember a moment where I was laying on my couch and I'd eaten an edible. So I was kind of flying a little bit, and I was listening to this audio track of Terence McKenna set to like a beat, like someone had kind of remixed a Terence McKenna lecture. And since your podcast is called Mycadelic, I assume people know who Terence McKenna is.
Oh, he's in the intro music. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
He's like the ultimate psychedelic philosopher. And I was listening to this song that someone had made of a Terence McKenna lecture where Terence was talking about memes. And of course, Terence was, memes are a very popular thing today. Terence was out there talking about memes in the 80s. And maybe even the 70s, I'm not even sure, but he would talk about how memes were how language was going to evolve, and people needed to start making memes basically to broadcast their vision into the world. Like, we have all these negative memes going around us, which are just ideas that are in culture, but how can we create positive memes? Like "make love not war" is essentially a meme. It's like a phrase that gets kind of caught in the collective consciousness and get spread. So he was out there talking about memes. So I'm listening. I'm stoned on an edible. I'm listening to Terrence McKenna talk about memes, and then I just found myself on my phone making memes, and in that moment.
Wow.
And then basically all these memes started coming through me. I swear I got some kind of a transmission from Terrence. And prior to that, I had would wake up every morning and work on whatever book I was working on at that time, and just spend a few hours working on a book. And the problem with working on a book is it's great when it's finished because you can share it. But there's years of working on a book where no one sees your output, no one sees your work. You can't share it. And
Right.
It's a little frustrating. So at that time, I'm like, well, what if I woke up every morning and instead of working on a book, I worked on memes, or I worked on social media art, content for social media, but content that is kind of art, art that's made for social media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it just started snowballing. It was just a creative avalanche, and I started posting constantly. And instead of work, I still work on books, but it seems like since moving to Austin, my memes and my internet content have kind of become my book or my my work, which is fun because you can share it so immediately, and it's just a lot. It's like this kind of open conversation with yourself and the audience that's kind of ongoing. So
Yeah.
Creatively, since moving to Austin, it's been big for me. I don't know what it is about the city, but it's worked for me. I definitely miss living by an ocean and things like that. But there's a great community here. It's a very kind of I joke about these this archetype of the awakened bro, where
Yeah, right. Yeah. I saw that meme. Yeah, that was great. And the 5D princess or something.
The 5D goddess baby.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I like to poke fun at spiritual archetypes and stereotypes, but it's great. There's Austin is this kind of the community that I found here is a kind of a spiritual oasis in the middle of Texas. So, it's a pretty cool place to live. It's interesting to see it become more and more of a cultural hub.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me, when you were talking about as a poet, as a writer, going to New York, I felt like that was the place to be. I started off in stand-up comedy, and so I was like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'm from New York, so it's just
Mike, I cannot hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
I was just remarking on how Austin's become a cultural hub now.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting that as a poet and a writer, you decided to move to New York because that was sort of the cultural hub. And there's a certain kind of energy there. And it's sort of traditionally been viewed as the place where, dreams manifest into reality. And that's where I started stand-up comedy. I'm from New York, and I started in stand-up comedy there and podcasting kind of early on. So there's something to, of course, being a creator, even when you're a creator that's creating content on the internet, online, there's still something to being around people that inspire you creatively. And there's a sort of energy, a vibe. And that's what I find really interesting about kind of the places that we choose to go. Even now in this time where, well, you can kind of be anywhere, you still want to be somewhere where there's some kind of, energy that's helping. So do you find that is a part of it as well? Do you find that you're getting inspiration from the people that you're around and the energy and the environment and the places and the art in Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how my art tends to change wherever I live because New York the energy does get you to kind of do things. It's very kind of masculine yang energy. So it does encourage you to be very active and always doing. But I feel like the level of stress and anxiety there makes it hard to create anything that has room to breathe. And all of the creative energy in New York these days, it feels to me, is more around entrepreneurs and tech startups and marketing. And there's a lot of business stuff happening in New York. And I think it's kind of the thing where at a certain point, the artists and the creatives get priced out of the city.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of creation, but I feel like these days it's, like Steve Jobs is more of an influence over the creativity in New York than, Bob Dylan or whoever it used to be.
Right.
But I did see that, like, in New York, if you look at my Instagram, it was all like black and white, and it was all kind of heady. It was all kind of like, I was making, because I wrote a book about the ego while living in New York. So it was all kind of about
shit your ego says.
Exactly. So it was, and I think I could only have written that in New York City because I was so living in my head, because that's the culture that I was just more acutely aware of, all the negative self-talk, because it's just a very mental kind of place. But then I moved to LA, and then you can see my Instagram feed starts to get colorful, and I start to play around with like pink and purple, because I was spending my time at the ocean and like drinking sparkling rosé and like, just like chilling in Malibu. And it was just like my soul kind of changed, and that influences your creativity. So yeah, definitely your surroundings and the vibe that you're around is whatever you put into you is going to come back out in one way or another. So the surroundings are super impactful on anything that we want to create.
Totally. Yeah. Oh man. It's bringing up Terrence. So I love Terrence. He's, one of my heroes. And one of the things that he says in relation to you, words or vibrations, he says, I'm going to do it to little Terrence here. It's the syntactical nature of reality. The real secret of magic is that the world is made of words. And if you know the words that the world is made of, well, you can make whatever you wish. And so
that's a great impression, by the way.
Thank you. The language, and by the way, that impression like has been spurred on by I don't know if you know Ramin Nazar. Yeah, he's great. So him and my friend Michelangelo, and we all sort of do a Terrence, and even Michael Phillip will do one too. So it's like everybody's trying to do a Terrence impression, and the pull, like the challenge to do a better one in this like fun way, feeds into the creative way that we express ourselves, and the same thing goes with these places in which we choose to reside in. The sort of language of New York, the words that carry the vibrations of New York. It's very hustle and grind and work hard, play hard, that kind of thing. And that manifests in the sort of material structures of the environment, which become this, repetitive, constant feedback loop that sort of informs our own consciousness and our creativity, shapes it, molds it. I forget who said it. I think it might have been Arthur C. Clarke. He says that we invent the tools and then the tools invent us. And so I love that concept of we get to kind of become different creative versions of ourselves when we choose to plug into different environments, and then how those environments feed us and how we feed those environments. It's just fascinating. I love that stuff.
Yeah, the whole words are vibrations thing. Yeah, Terrence was really onto something there, where he was really under the belief that language is the source code of reality. Mm-hmm. In a deep way that I'm still trying to fully grasp. But the vibration of words from the very foundational level, like sound, the sound vibration is kind of the at the heart of all existence, and sound vibration at some level, creates geometric shapes. So at what point is the whole material reality around us informed by essentially different vibrations of energy and vibrations of sound and different vibrational frequencies? And then we can tap into that by the words and language that we use. I mean, we can, you can only communicate a concept that you have the words and language to communicate. Mm-hmm. You can literally talk your way into being president of the United States. You can talk your way into any job interview. You can talk your way into any relationship because of the power of words. And I honestly think that's kind of why the world is it's partially why the world is where we are today. It's because if you look at the sound vibrations of our language in the news and politics, like what's really being broadcast is this, I call it, everyone speaking in argumentative absolutes.
Oh,
where wow. you turn on the news and it's just like it's this kind of just defensive language that is combative by nature and divisive by nature. And even the fact that all politics are pretty much run by lawyers, and look at the trait of how lawyers use words, like in a legal contract, it's to kind of use language as this constricting framework to kind of bind people to certain things. And it's like, whether it's good or bad, it's just, it does use language as a form of entrapment in a way to box people into certain laws. And so the arguments in the media and the contracts in the legal space, they seem harmless enough but they frame how we perceive our reality. So I'm trying to bring back like the use of language instead of to put people into a box, but to set them free. And I think that we've kind of forgotten the languages of poetry and mythology. Mm-hmm. Everything is so exact and everything is so literal. And it's like, well, if we change our language, we have to change our language first. We can't live in a world that's full of nuance and subtlety and, where we communicate beauty to each other until we can first use our language to kind of defuse the bomb and learn to speak differently and bring in humor and subtlety and nuance into what we say, because I don't think a lot is nearly as literal as people make it out to be with their beliefs,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, totally. It's, so yeah, what you're referring to in the legal context is something known as legalese, mm-hmm. which is, it's, in my opinion, when I look at it, and, I think maybe a normie, if you want to call them that, or a muggle, whatever, not to be like, but just like an average person that's not kind of in the world that we're in, it's just like, well, this is just normal. It is what it is. When you break it down, I mean, it's really like magic. It's literally magic. In magic, you have incantations and spells, and you say abracadabra, and things like that, and bring things into being by sort of like summoning them with the language, the small mouth noises, the vibrations. Even in the ayahuasca ceremonies, the icaros, the songs, they're these sort of downloads from the plants that are being sent to us to sort of digest in a way that we can't sort of logically, right? Like the whole vibration of the worlds in mass right now is this very like rigid, logical kind of, I mean, we see it in the architecture as well, as like this steel, glass, concrete kind of way of being, which is a prison, a cage in a lot of ways, because it confines the mind from going beyond into the mytho-poetic realm, where anything is possible, where it's this nebulous sort of, open space of paradoxical, contradictory, but fun and playful thinking. And yeah, I love that. Like when I go to your page, like that's the feeling I get, is like this feeling of like freedom and openness and playfulness and poetry, which is so needed, because poetry, I want to get your take. What is poetry? What is so special about poetry?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, to comment on something you said, it's totally true. Like people get hung up on the content of what they're saying and what they believe. Like if you're arguing over, whatever it is, masks or no masks, or like whatever the heated argument of the day is. People are so convinced that they're right, or this could be even an argument in your personal relationships. You get into arguments and you want to be right, and you're so committed to your point of view that you become you stubbornly defend it. I think that's kind of the default for most of us. But what if the higher truth is a vibrational truth, and we think that we're gonna? It's the same thing of kind of like trying to fight for peace, right? We want peace in the world, so therefore we're going to kill everyone who disagrees with us. It's kind of like that with like our arguments. It's like, okay, so my opinion is not being listened to enough, so I'm going to argue until it's believed, and that's the premise of the practice of law and politics, and we do that in our own relationships. But how can you get to the point where the content of the conversation is not as important as the vibration of the conversation? It's like there's that famous saying, like in marriage, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. Do you really want to fight for what you believe in? I mean, to a degree you do, but also like the tone is what's really creating the mood of the conversation, not the content. So how can you just make a joke of it? I mean, that's my approach, is how can you just make light of what you're arguing about? How can you add some nuance and understanding? Because nothing's as black and white as it seems.
Yeah.
So for me, that's sort of what poetry is for me, is a way to like defuse the bomb of language and kind of step away and create a certain vision or a vibration that you can put out into the world that basically inspires awe or laughter or reflection, right? So it's kind of like using language as a key to unlock some box that someone's in. I think we're all trapped in like different mental boxes based on how we were raised and what influenced us and what trauma that we have. So for me, poetry is just like a key to kind of just open that box and allow someone just to feel the sense of freedom, whether that's through humor, whether that's through beauty, whether that's through some kind of an expression of a higher truth. And you can write things in an essay form or, give a speech on something, and it's not going to have the same effect, because there's something about like being didactic and like lecture-y where you might get your point across, but and I believe this is why memes are poetry. Because with a meme or with a poem, you're not lecturing and you're not telling someone, this is what I think and this is what you should believe. You're just kind of entertaining ideas. And if you do that skillfully, it kind of creates this aha moment in someone where they reach that point on their own. So it's just, for me, it's like a way of it's like the opposite of a legal contract where you're trying to like put someone into a box through the use of words. You're just trying to open up the box and let their head get outside into some fresh air where they can breathe and just for a moment feel some beauty or feel some love or feel some laughter. That's what it is to me.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. What was it for you that sparked that within you? What did you see in the world being created when you first got turned on to poetry and writing that made you say, oh, like what opened that box for you, and what continues to open that for you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now I'm thinking back. So I mentioned that I grew up in a pretty small town in Minnesota. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to the world at large. Like we didn't travel a lot. You know, my world was pretty much the small town where I lived. Mm-hmm. And I remember finding like poetry books that my mom like just left around the house, because she always had tons of books around the house. And it was mostly just like the classics. You know, I remember reading like Edgar Allan Poe and like whatever other like compilations of famous poetry, you know, mm-hmm. that the kind of the standards. And I guess it just gave me it was like a window to other worlds. It was just like a window to, you know, leaving my small town and, you know, experiencing the grand wonder of of life. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it was for me. It was like a window into a bigger world, and that really broke open when I discovered like the beats, like when I was in high school, discovering like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, and like mostly them, and like the words of Bob Dylan and stuff like that, because then I saw poetry that was modern, like they were speaking in my language, talking about the media and television and this and that and the city, and it felt real, it felt visceral, it felt like the world I lived in, and seeing them be able to create poetry out of that, out of modern metaphors, then it brought it to life for me. So I just always, you know, I'm just kind of like a dreamer, and I'm always kind of like lost in a daydream. So for me, I just feel most comfortable when I have a notebook and I can just sketch out ideas, you know, in a leisurely way. And that's, to this day, like nothing for me is more kind of exciting than just like an open notebook with a blank page, because it's just like, it's like a sandbox. It's like playtime. It's you can create anything just by sketching on this piece of paper. And you know, there are certain lines, like a simple line that just kind of lives on forever. Like, you know, Ginsberg's famous poem Howl begins with the line, "I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness," and that's become this often repeated line that's very well known throughout the world. And just the idea that one day he just sat down and wrote that on a piece of paper. Any one of us could look at a blank sheet of paper and write down a simple sentence that ends up, you know, striking some kind of a common nerve, mm-hmm. And ends up being kind of remembered. And it's just, for me, that's fun. It's so easy in a way. You're just kind of writing down things, but you can do so much with it. Like the words, the right sentence phrased the right way can literally change the world. So for me, it's just such a fun sandbox to play in, and I'm always trying just to get my ego out. It's like a spiritual practice for me as well, where I'm just trying to get my ego out of the way and really just like kind of listen to what wants to come through me. Just trying to more or less, you know, listen to the space between my thoughts to see what comes through. And the less I try to control the process, typically is when the better stuff comes through.
Yeah, I find that to be, it's this like weird paradoxical kind of thing, because in a way you sort of have to have somewhat of an ego to like put yourself forward and assert your expressions into the world. There has to be some sort of like drive to say like, I am going to do this. But at the same time, the second that you attach to anything that is like more egoic than that, where it's like, ooh, I'm going to come up with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Like, I'm going to have something so profound. And then you start to sort of crumble and go into and lose yourself. And then, so I'm fascinated by this process. Myself, I still struggle with it from time to time. And I wonder, do you have a certain kind of process? Are there certain things that you just have remembered over time that are helpful for you to sort of get that ego out of the way, and sort of be the conduit to allow that flow to come through?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, you mentioned, the portal of 2012 and how so much changed for a lot of us that year.
Yeah.
And that's the year I moved to New York City. And before moving to New York City, I didn't have much of a spiritual, practice per se. And living in New York City, I found that I needed to, because the city is so crazy that it kind of, to balance it out, you kind of need to have some kind of a strong mindfulness practice. It's funny how many like very serious meditators there are in New York, because I think you kind of need that to balance it out. So living in New York gave me a bit of a rigorous approach to, meditation and yoga. And living in New York is where I discovered psychedelics and began, sitting with, ayahuasca and psilocybin and things like that. So all of these things had a huge impact on my creativity, because prior to like finding spirituality or finding meditation or finding psychedelics, I feel like I was pulling from a much more shallow pool for inspiration. But when you've spent countless hours meditating and doing breath work and doing yoga and going deep into plant medicine journeys, and that becomes kind of, it's not just a one-off, that kind of becomes your life. You can suddenly pull from a much deeper pool for ideas. So having that background of just like having meditated for years, having, gone deep within myself in other ways, like aside from writing, now when I sit down to write, I can just tap into a greater depth than I could have before. So for me, that's kind of what it is like having those practices that open me up. And even like, it might even like be going to an ecstatic dance event here in Austin. Yeah. And then, just dancing and moving, it gets you out of your own head. So doing that repeatedly is a big help. And then, so that's kind of the preparation, I would say, for the creative process. And then for me, I really just every morning, like clockwork, sit down with yerba mate, tea. I choose that before coffee, because coffee it does kind of focus your awareness, and it's useful to kind of get things done. But in terms of just tapping into creativity, I find yerba mate to be better, because it doesn't focus you and narrow your perception quite as much. So I have yerba mate and I have a notebook, and I just kind of, like I said, like listen, like check in with myself, check in with my body, see how I'm feeling, ask myself like what lessons have I been learning lately? Like what's floating around my consciousness? What's floating in my subconscious that's like trying to communicate to me?
Yeah. And do you write that out? Do you do you have these as like prompts where you write them out, or is it more of an internal kind of meditative thing?
Yeah, for me, it's just, I'm a very unstructured person in my life and in my creativity. So I don't set any like specific prompts, but that's just kind of I just kind of do that subconsciously, just checking in with myself to see what ideas come through. And, it's important to have patience when writing, because I don't usually write the first thing that comes to my mind. Sometimes I do, but it's about just like sitting in that. And this is where, like, having done psychedelics, it makes you better at this, because you're kind of comfortable in that liminal unknown space. Mm-hmm. Like you're not grasping for the first idea you have. You're just kind of sitting in that unknown and just kind of wading through it a little bit, and just kind of having the patience to let the idea marinate a little bit before trying to, express it fully. So, and sometimes no ideas show up. Like there are certain mornings where I'll sit there for an hour and just like nothing comes through. There are other mornings where I'll have like 5 ideas for like 5 different memes or 5 different poems, and I'll have a flood of ideas. So it's just about showing up so you have more times at bat for spirit to speak through me. It doesn't always work, but when you do it habitually, it'll work more often than it won't.
Yeah, definitely. That is, it's this sort of like non-process process, sort of just trusting that when you show up, something will emerge or not, and that's okay. But as long as you're showing up and allowing yourself to be open to receive, that the gifts that you have within you will rise.
Yeah, and that's what works for me. I mean, there are some people that will, tell you that you need to sit down and write 1,000 words every day. Right. You have to reach a certain word count, and some people might need that discipline. Maybe at the beginning of your journey as a writer or something that's more helpful, but I work better without any like strict rules like that to follow.
Yeah, sure. I'm curious about this because I've dabbled in writing here and there, but I'm not a writer by any means. And I'll do these solo podcasts, and a lot of the times when I do them, I don't really know what I'm going to say. I have sort of a feeling or a general feeling of where I want to go, maybe, or just kind of what I'm feeling at the time. And then it just kind of takes on a life of its own. And recently I've been struggling with that because I was trying to, like, I used to do them in this way where it was sort of just like I just show up and, maybe I'm a little high or something, and I'm just kind of open and ready to receive. And then I just start talking about something that's on my mind. And I got a lot of really good feedback from people around those kinds of episodes. And then what happened was the trap of, oh, these are good, like more of these. So then I was trying to make those, and trying to, and then I was like, oh, I need to sort of like perfect this so that it's really impactful. And then I sort of lost my way a little bit. And then recently I released one that I did, and I'm like so nervous about it because I'm like, this might be crap. Like, I think this is garbage, actually, when I just put it out. Like, I literally, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what I said. I don't know if it's cogent or cohesive or anything. And it was in the spirit, I was trying to recapture this spirit that I felt like maybe I had lost, which was this sort of like one take flow thing. But I'm very curious to see what would happen if I sort of organize my thoughts in a way where I allowed them to emerge and marinate, like you said, because I think that that's really there's something special. There's something that I'm really intrigued about that, about the difference between just kind of going off the cuff and talking first thing to come to your mind versus putting something on paper. And maybe it's just like a skeleton of what it is. So yeah, that personally, that's just what's interesting me right now about your process and the writing process in general.
What that comes up for me is, I think about, let's compare it to like a musical artist. I think like the musical artists that have the most longevity are the ones that are continuously trying new things. Like if you look at like a career like David Bowie or Bob Dylan, or these days Kanye West or Taylor Swift. I love all of these artists. They never really put out 2 albums in a row that kind of sound the same. Like it's easy to like chase after, like you said, like, oh, this worked well, so I'm going to go back in there and try to like duplicate that feeling. And that'll work sometimes. I mean, listen, we're putting out content all the time. Like you're putting out podcasts, and I'm doing all these Instagram posts. Like we're kind of always creating content, so you're going to repeat yourself to some degree. You know, you have to follow do a similar thing, and that's fine. But I'm always curious of chasing something I haven't done yet, because like you said, when you try something new, there's kind of an excitement to it and it feels fresh. I was just watching this new show on Hulu with it's a documentary of the famous music producer Rick Rubin interviewing Paul McCartney. And they just talk about the Beatles. They talk about Paul McCartney's music. They go to certain songs, and Paul will talk about how they made the song. It's a really great show. And they isolated the bass line on one of the Beatles songs, and you just heard the bass. And the bass is often like a passive instrument. It's a kind of a background instrument. But with Paul, he would just dance and play and experiment, and the bass would be sometimes becoming the driving force of a song. And Rick was like, "This is such an innovative bass line. Like how long did it take you to work this out?" And Paul's just like, "Oh, I just did that once. I was just playing around and experimenting, and that's what made it to the record." So he played this bass line literally once ever, and it's like, you know, embedded in history as part of a Beatles song. And that happened all the time with the Beatles and with other artists like this. So I think it's important not to, as much as we're all restricted by the mediums that we work in, like you can only do so much with a podcast, right? But I always like to see what else I can do and what other angle I can take and do something where I'm not entirely comfortable. Because when you're not entirely comfortable, that's when you're like, okay, I kind of need to figure this out. I don't know the territory here, so I have to explore a little bit. And that's what keeps creativity fun for me. And then you can kind of feel that energy come through. So lately I've been playing around with doing like TikTok videos and doing video in general. And
I love the one how to cleanse your feed. That was great.
Yeah, some sage on my to cleanse someone's social media feed. Thank you. Yeah. So like that was something I'd never done before. I'd never done video, much less TikTok. But it's like, well, I think when we're just like 1 foot outside of our comfort zone, that's when stuff that's a little more electric comes through, because we're figuring out the terrain and we're kind of taking the audience or the listener along with us. So for me, I love just to, you don't have to reinvent yourself entirely, but I think it's very useful to just keep tinkering and keep trying new things as an artist or a content creator.
Yeah, I'm always looking for that edge that makes me have that feeling of feeling most alive, and usually it's kind of when I'm accessing some sort of flow state where time and space ceases to exist. And, when we were down in Austin and myself, Jennifer and Michael were doing the panel, we had not discussed like what we were going to talk about really. We were just like, well, we're going to talk about wonder or something. And we'll just riff, and I love that so much. I love the sort of improvisational kind of mind jazz jamming, kind of like a jam band. Everybody just picks up their instrument and sees what happens. And there's this sort of emergent, spontaneous creation that's like only happening in that moment. To me, that's the most sort of electric, alive feeling that I could capture. And the best part about it, particularly at this event, because it's not often that I get to do events like this. I mean, before the pandemic, I actually was doing live things, and it was great. I felt so alive. I felt so connected. It's the audience. It's the people, the looks on their faces, their eyes widening afterwards, coming up to you and sharing what was happening for them or what they were thinking about. So I'm always trying to find a creative edge that makes me feel alive, and hopefully that transmits to other people to awaken some aliveness within them. And it's tricky when you think about it too much too, right? It's like this weird thing. I'm wondering, like, what do you think about that, and what is it for you? Like when you put things out there, and we kind of touched on a little bit about the unlocking the box, the key, that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm curious to get your take on that sort of like creation and feedback process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, a few years ago in New York City, I went to see Deepak Chopra speak. And, not to throw Deepak under the bus, because he's, written a lot of great books and done a lot of great things for the world. But this is a guy that, I mean, how many talks does he give a year? Probably quite a few.
Right.
So
yeah.
We were at this big church and it was packed, and he was giving a talk, and you could tell that he was just going through the motions. Like, and God bless him. He's been doing this for years, so I'm not criticizing him, but you could tell that, I mean, he could give that talk in his sleep. He was just like word for word. He knew the points. He sounded so tired and bored with himself. And it's like, on one hand, you're like, cool, I'm seeing Deepak Chopra. On the other hand, you're like, there's no energy behind this at all. It's very stale.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to try to capture that magic. I think that energy, the energy with which you make something, kind of, there's certain things that are communicated beyond the actual content of your words. Like I was saying, with the vibe and the energy of it. And if you're really excited while you're making something, I think that shines through. Like I try to practice spontaneity as a practice, almost, in the sense that, sometimes I'll make a meme or write something and it'll take me months before I post it, just because I don't get around to it, or, it just doesn't work its way into my feed. But there are other times, and I love doing this. I love when I have an idea, I'll grab my phone, I'll make something in 3 minutes, and then I'll post it immediately. And for me, that's just fun, because it might be really good and it might not. Like sometimes it's a home run, sometimes it's not. But there's something about not making things too precious.
Right.
Like putting them out there. Like I know, like I've mentioned Bob Dylan like 5 times on this podcast already, but back in the 60s, when Bob Dylan was making this like crazy, influential, groundbreaking music, and the Beatles too, like they were putting out like 2 albums a year. They were just getting in the studio, like working spontaneously, putting it out and moving on. They weren't like some of those were first takes.
Right.
So once you try to be like overly perfect about something and overly precious, you can kind of engineer the magic right out of it.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So I just try to like at least practice, not all the time, not for everything, but at least keep, just to keep myself on my toes, work fast, put it out, and then just get feedback. Like it's about like, putting it out there and moving on, and not getting too stuck or hung up with any particular idea or post or project or podcast. Because sometimes it's the energy in that fast stuff that just kind of connects. And if you try to overly engineer or perfect something, it doesn't always make it better.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that's a couple things are coming. Have you ever seen the video? It's on YouTube of Timberland, the producer in the studio with Jay-Z, and he's showing Jay-Z a bunch of beats for the Black album, and then it stops. Like Jay-Z just starts like nodding his head like really intensely, like you see the fire in his eyes, like something lit up in him, and he just goes into the booth and just recorded in one take "Dirt Off Your Shoulders."
Wow!
And I was like, it's an amazing video. You see him he's listening to each beat that Timberland presents, and he's just like, no, I'm not really feeling that one. And then he drops the and Jay-Z is just like possessed. Like it's like something had just taken over him. He stands up and his eyes are like, whoa. And he's just like, his eyes are moving around. You can see he's thinking of all these words. He's like, he just goes in the studio and he just lays it down. And it's just like, that's so magical to me. And it's like when those moments happen, it's like, wow, so it's like this kind of masterful art of allowing yourself the space, almost probably allowing your space to just be a fool sometimes too, and fail, right? Because like you said, like you'll just make something in 3 seconds and you'll send it out there, and who knows if it's gonna be, quote unquote good or not, and you just take that risk, right? You live on that sort of razor's edge and find out, I guess.
Yeah.
Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're kind of dancing around the Buddhist idea of beginner's mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Zen mind, beginner's mind. I think that's a book. That's a book that I haven't read yet, but
exactly. It's a good one. And
I should read it. Yeah.
But just that, I think that's one of my favorite Buddhist books actually, but just the concept of always, no matter what you do, like show up as if you're a beginner, like,
the student and the teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like show up, like imagine like your first day at work at a new job. Just think of how like wide-eyed and ready you are. You kind of like you don't know what you're doing, but you're eager to find out, and you're eager to find out what you have inside of you, and you're just not afraid to fail because you don't know the rules quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're not, then you work at that job for 5 years, and it just becomes, again, it's like Deepak giving his talk where it's just and he's boring himself, right? Or like you do your job as if you're just like you're not inspired anymore. But when you're a beginner and you're like, hey, I don't quite know what I'm doing, but let's just figure it out and let's work in real time to play and experiment. That's when the best stuff happens. So yeah, I love that idea of beginner's mind, especially for anything to do with creativity.
All right, that book's going to be read next. I promise. I'm recording it. I'm making a vow on the show. I'm going to read that book. I have book ADD. Like I'll be interested in something and I'll start reading it, and then something else will pop into my mind. I'll be like, "Ooh, I'm fascinated with that. I'm going to get that book." I have so many fucking books, and I'm just people even text me like, "Yo, have you read that book yet?" I'm like, "No, I still haven't gotten to it yet. I've got interested in 6 other ones." But yeah, speaking of books, you have a book coming out soon, which is like the best title I've ever heard in my life. How to Laugh in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis. juicy, delicious. Just, it has that big chef's kiss to you for that one. I can't wait for this to come out. When does it come out?
Yeah, thank you. I always liked the idea of like a really long book title. That's uncomfortably long. So I thought I'd just do that. But it should be out.
I used to do podcast titles like that. They were like a paragraph.
Yeah.
I think it was because I enjoyed this band, the Arctic Monkeys, and they used to release like She Moves Really Good on the Dance Floor, but I Can't Dance, or like those are like the titles of their songs. Anyway, so the book should be out.
Yeah, it's going to be out early September. It's finished. It's in production. It will be available as soon as it's finished being printed, basically. So it's available for pre-order now through my Instagram, and it'll be released officially in, I would say early September.
Yeah, and it seems really interesting to me. We're talking about taking risks creatively and doing things a little bit different. This is a little bit different for you, but it's, I guess, also informed by your recent journey of making more memes and things like that. So we're living in strange times, and we get strange creations. So yeah, talk a little bit about the book and how it came to be and what we can expect from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the foundation of the book is a poetry book. But even the poetry, I'm hesitant to say, poetry, people have all kinds of connotations to poetry, and especially, there are good poets today, don't get me wrong, but a lot of poetry these days is just kind of like
derivative.
Sad derivative poetry about your own personal relationships or something. So it's poetry, but it's funny. It's like, it's dramatic. It's it's not traditional poetry, and it is mixed and matched with all kinds of memes, illustrations, and cartoons, and other forms of like word art. So it's very much like you flip through this book and get all kinds of different kinds of content. It's almost like it's very much informed by the internet. If you're on Instagram and you scroll, you're going to get all kinds of different stuff. So it's kind of like for the attention span that people have after now scrolling social media for years now. And the central theme of all of it, the poetry, the memes, the illustrations, is kind of like the title says, like how to laugh in ironic amusement during your existential crisis. Because I kind of think that the whole world is going through an existential crisis at the moment. We don't know what is going on. We don't know what the world is going to look like in a year. Everything's up in the air, from the economy to politics to the pandemic itself, to all of the different regulations that are being implemented as a result of the pandemic. It's a very uncertain time. And the book is essentially trying to not make sense of what's going on, because making sense is something that is really hard to do in this time. But it's about just living in that world. Like, it's like one thing that if you watch a TV show or a movie that comes out today, it's interesting how it's all the entertainment being created today is like not truly acknowledging the absurd and chaotic and uncertain state of the world. It's like the entertainment world is still kind of in a little bit of this kind of like suspension of belief around what's happening.
Right.
And there have been some albums that have come out that have really kind of like tackled the issues of what's happening today. But I feel like artists are struggling to find ways to express what's happening and how we really feel.
Yeah.
So it's a book that doesn't in any way pretend that the world is any different than what it is. This was a book that was born in the height of the 2020 mania around all of it, the civil unrest, the virus, the conspiracy theories, the politics, Trump, like all of it. It's a book that really looks at all of it and doesn't shy away, and just tries to tell a story of hope amidst all the chaos and uncertainty that we're dealing with today.
Amazing. Yeah. What is your vision of hope? Like when you think maybe you're by yourself or expressing to other people about what, do you have a certain kind of like, well, I really hope that we go in this direction, or that, do you have like a sort of vision for the world, or a hope that can kind of set us to be more passionate, free, and in love with life, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting for the aliens to come and save us. No, but
take me with you.
I know. But if that doesn't happen, yeah, I mean, I think my approach, because I think before you can have a plan for how to actually change laws and everything like that, you kind of need a vision on what that world looks like. So I think as a poet and as an artist, I'm just trying to kind of paint a picture of what a more sustainable, compassionate, empathetic world looks like. In broad terms, I think that we need to move into a more decentralized, democratic world. I think that, we look at the idea of, listen, America as a country, it's responsible for both amazing, great things and also unspeakable, terrible things. But I think at this point in the world, I think it's really strange that there's this huge country governing hundreds of millions of people, and we're all kind of supposed to follow the same leader and all have the same laws, despite the vast differences in culture across the country. It's like, I think that a lot of what we're doing now isn't sustainable, just in terms of the logistics and the supply chains and this top-down system that exists in banks and in politics and in corporations. I think that moving towards a bit of a more local model, where, especially now, where it's like, okay, certain cities are going to mandate vaccines or mandate masks, and meanwhile Florida is over here and nothing shut down ever, and the cases of the virus are essentially the same as everywhere else. So I think it's tricky to impose the same set of laws on every city, on every state, on every community. So I think like it's going to be a transition to kind of move from this, quote unquote patriarchal system into a world that's more communal, more local, more sustainable, more based on community. And that transition is, I don't think, necessarily going to be entirely smooth.
Yeah.
But a lot of us are already there. And I think, back to the theme of your podcast, I think psychedelics are going to play a very important role in this, because, when people are continued to be thrown out of the safety of society because the economy is crashing, or because of they no longer want to live in a city that's mandating this or that, and the social structure is crumbling. A lot of the people that are, quote, stuck in the matrix, or the normies that you mentioned earlier, right? They're going to need some direction and some guidance. And I think psychedelics done in the right context, with the right space holders and the right shamans and the right, healers, are going to play an important role in helping kind of transition people into whatever that new world is. But I think that to put a ribbon on it, I would say that the world that I hold a vision for is basically just one where we're moving away from being so stuck in our own heads and moving away from the logical, intellectual models of the Enlightenment, essentially, and moving towards a more heart-centric space. Because logic is great and the ego is important, and it's important to be smart about things. But if you're making decisions solely based on logic, without any kind of sense of the heart or compassion, that's kind of essentially, I think, what got us into the mess we're in today, where like a corporation is free just to, maximize profits by any means necessary, because logically that is what makes the most sense for the business. Meanwhile, they're destroying the environment, they're destroying the souls of their employees, and they're making a net negative impact on the world just for profits, because that's what logic dictates. So I think moving to a more heart-centric way of living together is that is my hope for where we can go and where we can emerge from the existential crisis and the dark night of the soul that we're having collectively now. We can emerge from that with a more, empathetic and heart-centric perspective.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I agree. That, too much order creates chaos in a way, right? It's like when things become too rigid, then it gets it's confusing. It's like, look, the cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. There's so much novelty and diversity that are spewing from every direction, from every soul that is posting something, from everybody that's inspired by you and says, oh, wow, Words of Vibrations, like such a good page. Like I want to do something like that. I'm inspired, or, whatever it is, there's everybody is letting themselves out and expressing themselves, or has the ability to. And the main sort of dominant, old, archaic status quo establishment thing is like, no, don't think about that. There's one way. It's like they're trying to contain this like uncontainable, infinite, complex thing. And we even see it more now too. Like you were talking about, the thing about psychedelics, Terrence and Dennis, when they went down to La Chorrera to try and extract something out of the psychedelic realm and bring it back, I think that is happening. It's more people are now turned on to the psychedelic experience, to altered states, to flow states, to meditation, to yoga, to float tanks, to breath work, ecstatic dance, cacao ceremonies. There's so much of this happening, and it's giving people an opportunity to sit with, see what's inside of themselves and see how they can express themselves. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's my wish too, is that we kind of decentralize and localize a little bit more to express the unique and authentic things that our souls really truly want to express. And then, that sort of reorients our entire value system, and the language changes. We see the language changing with meme culture and online culture and, Twitch streaming, internet, Gen Z, it's already changing, and that's kind of shaping the environment. So, there's more timelines available of reality. This is something that I mentioned. I watched the Loki show on Disney Plus. It's phenomenal if you're a fan of the Marvel universe or whatever. But it was really cool because the premise of it was that Loki goes into a different timeline, and he's then captured by the multiverse authority of preserving the sacred timeline. So he kind of like deviated from a timeline, and these people are the authorities of preserving the sacred timeline. So they can't make sure that they make sure that people don't deviate from the one true timeline. There's the sacred timekeepers, and they're like the arbiters of truth, and they control a particular version of reality. But as we're expanding now in, to bring it back to where we are, as we're expanding now, as time is speeding up and things are getting stranger, like we're moving into, it can't be contained anymore. So really it's this sort of opening up of reality, choose your own timeline, your own adventure. And I know you and I have both hung out with Jessa a bunch. She's been like a total breath of fresh air and rejuvenated me creatively as well, because a lot of the things that she talks about I've experienced in a different context, usually through the psychedelic realm with ayahuasca or psilocybin. I have these sort of similar types of insights and visions and entity connections and things like that. And so anyway, I feel like I'm ranting or rambling a little bit here, but just this idea is so juicy that we have these infinite realities that we can create and participate in, that we can co-create. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just like,
I'm with you. I'm with you. And I would say that, it's as tough as this time is, it's also a great time, because a lot of the things that you're talking about, like 50 years ago, people didn't have access to this. 50 years ago, very few people had access to psychedelics, to yoga, to breath work, to ecstatic dance. People were very much living in a box. I guess 50 years ago, that's more like the 70s. So I guess now it's like 70 years ago.
literally living out of a box, living out of the television, which is like this fake plastic tree representation of the fire that people would commune over. And so you go to this illuminating box and it tells you what the world is. Now we go to an infinite scroll. Right? It's like infinite. Anyways.
Yeah. So we're definitely tapping into something. I think that we are. I think the whole like singularity idea is real, in the sense that we are rapidly approaching some type of seismic shift in consciousness. And I think a lot of that's already happened. Terrence McKenna was running around in the 70s with his brother, learning all of this firsthand from scratch, and he had to go to South America, and he had to go to lecture, to teach people about what he was learning. And those people that he taught ended up becoming teachers and writing their own books, and now there's just so much available. And I think that we are moving towards some type of this idea of timelines, and our consciousness is tapped into, so like the world and reality is so much more vast and amazing and multidimensional than we ever grew up believing.
Right.
And as we start to acknowledge that, and you look at the kids being born today, like they're just born with a intuitive sense of how to use the internet and how to do all this stuff. And so things have changed a lot in the past 10, 20 years. And I think they're going to continue to accelerate. And I think that the craziness of the world today is just kind of growth pains, because we're accelerating at a pace beyond our society's, ability to contain it. So that's why we're seeing all of this crumbling of old ways. Yeah. We're outgrowing our clothes, exactly, and we're outgrowing our political systems
really quickly, and the styles are changing like so fast. It's like,
right. So it's exciting, and it's not easy, and every day is a bit of a challenge just to kind of hold on. But the more people people like us that can at least create an environment or a safe space for people to connect and find each other. Like I think there's Douglas Rushkoff says, "Find the others," where it's like,
yes,
people Douglas, that think, he's great. People that think like you, people that kind of are in the same, and the internet allows us to find the others. So we're kind of creating our own web, which, just like Terence McKenna influenced us from the work he was doing. Now there's hundreds and probably thousands of people that are on a similar wavelength that can collectively just continue to expand the growth that we're all having in terms of our consciousness. And it's not always easy, but it's certainly an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, it's not, it won't be easy, but it'll be worth it for sure. I guarantee that.
Yeah.
James, is there anything that you, as a creator, putting out content, or sometimes I hate using that word, content, putting out poetry and moving, impactful pieces for people to, that they feel, because that's what a lot of the, mentioning before, when I go to your page, it's just like, ooh, I feel good. Like I feel this is like cool. This is good. And it's not such like a heady and like intellectual thing, but it's deep and profound and impactful. Is there anything that you censor yourself over? Is there anything that you worry about? Like, I'm wondering as a creator, like, is there anything that you feel that you're like, damn, I don't know how to express this, or I don't know how I feel about this, or, any of that sort of, maybe trepidation or concern over like, what will, how do I make sense of this to put this out there? I'm feeling it. Maybe it's a tough question, because if we're feeling something, we can't necessarily, we can't put it into words. It's difficult to put into words sometimes, this kind of maybe chaotic feeling or whatever it is. But is there anything for you that you experience like that?
Yeah. And I know that's a common theme of how a lot of people feel. I know that a lot of people feel a little bit muzzled because they don't want to be canceled, or they don't want people to disagree with them, so they kind of keep quiet and they don't post. I know people that are afraid to post because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and getting in trouble, or getting people mad at them, because the world is so divisive.
Right.
I don't shy away from anything, but I do. And I've learned this over time, because I have, certain feedback I think you can grow from and you should take to heart and learn from. And certain feedback for me, I just completely, it's like, if you misunderstood what I'm saying, that's not really my fault, but it does help me become more skillful in my use of language so as not to be misunderstood. But for the most part, I stay away from topics that are very divisive, because you don't win. If I'm not going to go on Instagram and be either, pro-vax or anti-vax. During the whole Trump Biden election, I wasn't going to go on and be like, pro-Trump or pro-Biden, because frankly, I didn't like either one of them.
Right.
But, there are certain hot button topics that for me, some people are out there fighting the good fight, and they're going to get their hands dirty with stuff like that. For me, it's better just to stay away. So because you're just not going to win. You're going to make some people happy. You're going to make some people mad. And either way, you're just going to add fuel to the fire.
Right.
So what I rather do is like, okay, let's promote having an open mind. Like I look at like, what's the issue under the issue? So I could be mad and say, this group of people is wrong about this belief. But I rather look under the surface and be like, well, what's causing them to be wrong about this belief, and play around with what I find there. So like if people are like, I'll talk about how people are, I had a post recently that was about how we should have compassion for people who are, instead of being mad at people that are brainwashed by the media, how can we like acknowledge that they have they have a trauma bond with the media and with the government, and they're misinformed because they've been taught to believe that these sources of quote unquote authority have their best interests at heart, and they should believe everything they say. We can be mad at the people, but it's more about having compassion for how they reach those conclusions instead of trying to fight them and say, you're wrong. Well, why are they wrong? Like, how can you open people's minds without telling them that they're stupid? So I don't tackle political issues like that head on. I'll try to like I said, look at what's underneath the issue and address more of the kind of emotional or mental like reasons people end up thinking the way they do. And that way I'm trying to maximize, I'm not trying to like shy away from the issue. I'm just trying to say it with subtlety, with nuance, in a way that's not going to offend people, because you can't change people after you've offended them. You need to like have a softer approach. So I do avoid certain topics, but not because I'm avoiding it. It's because I'm addressing it in a different way, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I remember like in the 90s, like the Jerry Springer type shows, like were very popular, right? Like Maury and stuff. And they would always have like, this kid is a real asshole, like their parents say they're fed up, and they like bring the kid out, and the kid's like giving the finger to the audience, and the audience is like, fuck you, kid. And it's like, it's not the kid's fault. Like, let's get to the more like core issue that we can all feel and we all relate to, because I believe like what you're talking about here, everybody has those open, vulnerable moments where someone has passed away and you're at a funeral, or, there's a period of introspection and contemplation when you're able to get off the kind of rat race treadmill and have that sort of really deep human interaction, which psychedelics can really help with. Like the more our society has the ability to go into unknown places where they can have the time and the space to let go and surrender, the more human we become, because we're all human. We're all, these homesick aliens, right? Because we feel like we're not like, man, this world doesn't like fit for us. It's weird. Like, and we're trying to force ourselves to adjust to it. And then I think that's when people become sort of like mutated and like become like, for me personally, I deleted my Twitter a little while ago because I become a different person when I go on Twitter. There's this like demon energy that like comes out. Like I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go back and forth with people in this weird way. It's not me. It's like this mutated version of me that gets brought out by the container, by the vessel of this medium. Yeah. And, I love what you said, and getting to that core thing that we can all identify with. Things don't make sense, and I don't feel safe, and I don't know what's going on. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Don't engage in the don't just accept like the media's terms of the narrative and the conversation. Like, just because in the media it's like, again, I'm just going to go back to vax, anti-vax, because that's what's going on right now. The media is just like, it makes it so heated. It makes it seem like, and there's bots too. Like there's so many, speaking of Twitter, I mean, Twitter is the worst for so many reasons, but also for bots. I mean, I don't think people realize how many, and who's programming these bots. I have no idea. Whether it's foreign governments, whether it's the CIA, I have no idea.
China.
But China, exactly. But there are so many bots, and on both sides, there are people have found like these templated tweets that are posted hundreds of times, and they're either like, kill everyone who's not vaxxed, or it's like kill like the vax is killing everyone. Like, and so there's so much misinformation that's just being spread via the media, via social media bots. So like, we don't need to engage in the conversation in the terms that the media is pushing us to do. It's like we're being pushed into a civil war.
Right.
And people think they don't have a choice. People think, oh, this is what's happening. People are actually, and then people get so mad because they see a post on Facebook and then they get super mad themselves. That post could have been a bot, or it's some paid person, or it's someone who's incentivized to have this opinion. Like, people in the real world are not nearly as divided on these issues as the internet makes it seem. So I'm not going to let the media dictate the terms of the conversation. You know what I'm saying? So I'd rather just
I love it. Yeah.
Have compassion and try to speak to people as humans, and try to speak to the deepest parts of them, and try to speak to their hearts, instead of just, again, adding more gasoline to the fire, because we do not need that right now.
100%. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, we don't have to agree to play by their terms. I love that. Yeah, it's like, there's they're like, well, the only game in town is Monopoly, and it's like, well, no, we could play all kinds of things. We're playing Jenga over here. Like, we don't have to play your game. So I absolutely love that. Yeah. James, anything that you feel that's really like alive and present for you right now, that you've been thinking about, feeling, that you want to express or kind of riff on or talk about as we sort of dwindle down here to the end of the pod?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, I've seen some people, let's just look at this past year. And we've all had quite a year, no matter who we are and where we live. And I've seen some people become more afraid and go, get sucked into these media narratives and become more uptight and angry. And I've seen some people that have just said, fuck it, and like become more wild and more real and more authentic. And those are the people that have grown this year, and those are the people that have become much more happy this year. So crisis can go either way. We can either let it crush us and kill our souls, or we can grow from it and learn from it and kind of just dive in head first to the craziness and almost like baptize ourselves in the fire of the chaos. And that sounds scary, but the people I know that have just continued to live life on their own terms and not listen to all the noise that's out there, but finding the signal of their own higher selves in the middle of all of this noise. Those are the people that are growing. Those are the people that are having the most fun. And no matter how old you are in your life, growth has nothing to do with your age. I'm a big fan of just becoming different people. And I think that the times we're living in now is demanding that we become different people. The same way the old world wasn't working. The people that we grew up being told we needed to be, those people aren't working anymore. We need to evolve and grow and shape shift and adapt and embrace the weird and just not let the fear dictate how we live our lives. That's all I would say.
That's all I would say. That's perfect. That's great. That's amazing. I mean, that is, I don't want to tarnish it by saying anything else after that. That was great. Well done. That's the podcast. So thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. Tell people where they can go to find you. Words Are Vibrations is the Instagram page.
Yeah. And thanks for having me on, Mike. Words Are Vibrations on Instagram. And then my podcast is Homesick Alien Club.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, James. This has been a real joy to spend this time with you. And go follow him, check him out, check out the podcast, folks. And until next time, much love to you all. Peace.
Hey, I hope you guys liked that episode as much as I did. If you did, show your support and leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Helps improve visibility of this show, get it in front of more eyeballs so people can get down with what we're getting down with over here. Consider joining the Patreon. It's patreon.com/MikeBrank. Get access to early releases, bonuses, the Mycadelic Inner Sanctum Discord chat, and more. And support the sponsors. Get some cool things for yourself and help let them know that you're interested in the products that we're offering and the services we're offering here. And that's a way of continually supporting this show as well. So Being True to You, Fungi Academy, Ohana Kava Bar, Sheath Underwear, all the links are in the show notes, show description. Go click them, check them out. You got the discount promo codes over there as well. And it's a way that pays the bills for this show to keep going. And thank you so much to everybody that supports and shows love for this show by leaving 5-star reviews or just telling people about it. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Danny Burnett and Galaxia for the music. And thanks to James McCrae for making this an awesome episode. Go follow him. Stay in touch, everybody. Message me. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, peace.